On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV.
Good evening and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. You're with Talk, we're on TV, we're on radio, we're online, and of course we're on your smart speaker as well. Coming up, 3 women accused of celebrating Hamas by displaying images of paragliders at a pro-Palestine march have been let off with just a conditional discharge. Experts fear a rise in XL bully attacks when owners go on summer holidays because pet insurers are imposing such tough restrictions on housing those hellhounds that kennels are becoming reluctant to look after them. And double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been granted yet another chance at freedom with a fresh parole hearing in the pipeline. Good evening, Britain, and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, right here at Talk TV. We've got a huge show for you tonight at our brand new time of 8 p.m. Tell all of your friends. 3 women have been found guilty of celebrating the October the 7th Hamas attack by displaying images of paragliders at a pro-Palestinian march in central London. The trio, all aged in their 20s, were convicted of a terror offence in order to pay £400 in costs. However, one of the offenders won't even have to pay the fine because she's a migrant who isn't entitled to benefits. So is this a green light for anyone who wants to make offensive statements at protests to escape without proper punishment? Joining me now to discuss this, my panel is already here. Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Ryan Sabey, journalist and broadcaster Emma Woolf, and, of course, barrister and broadcaster Mr Andrew Eborn.
Of course.
Very good evening to all of you.
Evening, Mike.
Welcome. And let's kick things off straight away. I mean, how on earth is it right that you could be charged with a terrorist offence, but you just pay a fine, and that's all?
And just to make it clear, it is an offence under the Terrorism Act to it says wear clothing or carry a display of articles in public in such ways or circumstances as to arouse reasonable suspicion that the individual is a member or supporter of a prescribed organisation. So they had these images. It seemed clear, but obviously the court looked at it, and what the judge said in that particular case, they were sort of turning around and saying, well, it's not as serious as it could be in those situations. They're still convicted. It's still a criminal offence, but a conditional discharge, as you say, it means that if something happens, basically again, then they will get convicted and sentenced.
But that's the same as any other kind of suspended sentence scenario, isn't it? I mean, surely terrorism should be a different category. I mean, if you're going to be charged with a terrorism offence and convicted, then there should be the equivalent of a sex offenders register that you go on to as a terrorist, don't you?
You would have thought so. And I think the other interesting thing...
I mean, what if I'm sitting next to one of these people on the bus?
Yeah.
Not that I'm on a bus very often.
I think the other thing worth mentioning is the fact that under the unduly lenient sentencing scheme, you can go to the Attorney General and she can recommend that this is looked at again. That only happens in the Crown Court, whereas this was in the Magistrates Court, so it can't be looked at again. So, I suppose they've got a conviction of sorts, but it's at the lower end.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, I suppose to give the police some credit for once, because we don't always do it. This is probably why they don't arrest very many people, because they know that the outcome is probably going to be this, and there's not much point in going through all that hard work.
It does depend on the evidence. I mean, the maximum penalty under the Act is 14 years in prison or a fine, but in the lower courts it's 6 months in prison or £5,000. It does depend on the evidence, and the problem when we report...
But what evidence do they need? They were wearing these symbols.
And I think this kind of outcome really will give people, often these don't have much effect, but this will really give people on those marches who want to be offensive, who want to carry banners, who want to chant, really absolutely terrorist slogans, they'll realise they can do what they want.
Well, we've seen it. We're going to be talking about... Yeah, I mean, we've seen it, and we're going to be talking about it later on. The business at the Soho Theatre, where, a comedian, so-called, pro-Palestinian comedian, who thinks it's OK to berate 2 members of his audience who happen to be Jewish, and basically, swear at them, intimidate them, get the whole crowd chanting at them. This is now considered to be acceptable behaviour.
And it was appalling. I saw that. I saw the clip on Twitter as well, where he was basically on the march and basically riling people up on that sort of basis. So it is important. Interesting, I say, just going back to the facts, which is important, they said when delivering the verdict, what they made it clear is there's no evidence in the thing that any of the defendants were supporters of Hamas or were seeking to show support for them. So that's what the court found.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
But that's what they're saying they found. So as a result of it, that's why they got the lenient sentence. But you're right, looking at the evidence that we've seen, it seemed fairly clear.
Well, I mean, if you're wearing a depiction of something that happened as part of a terrorist atrocity, it's pretty clear why you're doing it, isn't it?
And that's why the Crown prosecution felt there was...
Mickey Mouse running the court system.
Yeah.
You know, there's no evidence. I don't know what that means. It's a picture of a parachute. Well,
Which is why the message is clear.
regime.
You can act with impunity. You can say and do what you want in this country.
Yeah.
Unless you're on the right side.
Unless, of course, you want to start, spouting from the Bible or something, in which case you give us to move along.
In which case, yeah.
I mean, it is just... I find it staggering that the more... The judiciary in this country gets involved in these kinds of, fairly high-profile cases, because it is a high-profile case, because normally speaking, magistrates' court, nobody cares, but this is quite an important case.
Oh, very important.
And they just keep getting it wrong, don't they?
And you hear all these cases about soft justice over the years, whatever the case may well be, and this sort of feels like it could, even though the magistrate will have looked at the evidence, looked at everything, it feels like it sort of fits in that category a little bit.
And what about the other business? One of them is a migrant. I don't know whether that's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant. Yeah. Not allowed to work, presumably, not allowed to get benefits. I mean, I don't know quite how that works, because illegal migrants...
You would have thought she would have been on her best behaviour.
Well, illegal migrants who come here get some form of benefit, so I'm not quite sure what they mean.
I think one of the questions is, that it does raise, that if they were granted asylum at any stage, you wonder whether the Home Secretary or the government can actually intervene and revoke that.
Well, they won't, though, because this is the same problem we had with the chemical attacker, isn't it? That guy Zabey, because he was not sent to prison. And you only get deported if you go to prison for more than a year. So if you get a suspended sentence, you don't have to worry about it.
But he should have been deported the minute that the first asylum claim was turned down.
He should have been, of course. But, I mean, that's what we know now is as a broken system. But at least you'd hope that the judiciary would catch it.
No, absolutely. And they always say that trust comes in on foot but leads on horseback. And that trust is at an all-time low, both in the media, in terms of the judiciary and various other things. And this is why they introduced this sort of filming, if you like, televising of sentencing.
Yeah.
So they could unpack and explain to the audience a bit more as to why it's happened. This case is, on the face of it, is appalling. Yeah. And you need to sort of turn around and say, look, why have they reached this decision? What they sided actually with them and said, actually, we don't believe you're supporters of Hamas. Right. So that's the reason it's so lenient. Which, looking at that, as you say, it's outrageous on the evidence we've seen. It doesn't make sense.
And you wonder whether they should extend the televised screenings of...
Absolutely.
So instead of just the sentencing, which is great for transparency, whether maybe to extend them, if it's a short case, maybe start with magistrates and screen them.
I mean, one of the great shows I used to watch when I lived in America was Court TV. They actually started an entire channel, and you could watch all sorts of amazing cases from the sublime to the ridiculous all day, every day, sort of 24/7. It was fascinating.
That's how you reach the kind of intellect that you have
That must be what it is,
We used to have Crown Court. Do you remember Crown Court in this country?
Yeah.
I used to love that as a baby barrister.
Oh, yes.
All that sort of
stuff.
Really,
really fun. Speaking of migration, the entire fleet of Border Force cutters and patrol boats have been entirely withdrawn from tackling migrants in the Channel. Great. So now we haven't even got any boats in Border Force, and that's where everybody's coming in.
Border Force to Border Farce. I mean, that's your work on that.
Very good.
But I think you were here all week. What you need to look at, however, is the reality. We were discussing this a little bit earlier about these vessels, and apparently it's not such a big story, you were saying.
Well,
what I'm saying that the border.
Well, it's easy for you to say.
No, exactly.
There's 4,000 coming this weekend again. There's no boats.
I think one of the issues is the border force have actually those cutters are not being used, but what they are doing, they've got 5 or so other ones. So there is a different. They're just thinking about it differently, and maybe that the border force cutters can't.
God,
actually
it's almost
pick
like
them
you
up.
work for the Home Office. We're just thinking about it differently.
This is why he's here. He's got all the details.
Thinking about it creatively.
But it says, confusingly here, it says they're now left to using a fleet of private vessels, normally used for servicing wind farms.
I mean, a great headline, isn't it?
No, but let's be... It may be that the actual cutters are not the ones to get in amongst the small boats and pull people out of water and things. So it just may be that they're not fit for purpose.
The real test...
But why would the Border Force have boats that are not fit for purpose for the Border Force?
Well, the Home Office...
I mean... Maybe if they're used for things like trying to intercept smuggling gas... I mean, I'm not talking about migrants, but in terms of, drug busts, that kind of thing. And that's what they're really good for. Whereas these smaller vessels... they've been trying to phase the border force.
So who's got these cutters then? Can you go and buy one?
No, they've fallen.
Fancy a border force cutter at the weekend.
They've fallen into disrepair. Most of them haven't been serviced. So yeah, they are effectively out of service.
So it's how you spin the story, though, isn't it? If the story is these are more effective, we've got more people, and we're stopping the boats coming over.
But except they're not.
It's costing the taxpayer £36 million.
Well, then, and also they're not stopping the boats.
So there we go. So that's why it's a bad idea.
So it doesn't matter if we're on dinghies or border force cutters or cruise ships, not stopping the boats.
What we really need to do is speak to France more and actually get our...
We've done all that. We've already given them a load of money.
Loads of money we've thrown over the channel.
Get back on the phone to Macron and say, we need to patrol the beaches. We need to send our own people over there to actually make sure these people don't get beyond.
Do you remember they used to have those, X's with barbed wire on the beaches of Normandy, to stop the British from landing? Maybe we could do those, but turn them around the other way so that you can't leave.
It's a good idea.
What do you think of that?
What I love is the people that say, well, how do these huge inflatable dinghies get through Europe? How do they get to the French border? It's true, isn't it? How are they carrying this thing? Where are they coming from?
Yes.
Mike's barbed wire would stop it because they'd get punctured, wouldn't they?
That would be one way to do it. But, I mean, I've seen and spoken to people who have been over there doing investigations, and apparently they are coming in from China via Turkey. That's where they manufactured. And they're basically driven there. Inflated and on the backs of lorries, and they've seen.
I mean, there is
lorries.
quite a lot of indications that people are people traffickers long before they get to Calais.
Oh yeah, very much so.
You absolutely go up the train. You've got to target the people traffickers. They're the real ones, and work on that sort of thing.
And every now and again they do get one or two of them, but there's so many.
We don't hear enough about that though, and ways that we can stop that. That's more effective.
Yeah. Hold fire. See you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Moving on now, though, the wonderful Meghan and Harry have found themselves dropping the word royal from their domain name. So if you want to hear the latest from the lovely couple instead of typing www.sussexroyal.com, you now just type sussex.com. Could this be a sign of the family rift expanding ever further? Back with me now, I'm delighted to say, the panel are here, Ryan, Emma and Andrew. This is my favourite bit of the show, obviously, Harry and Meghan, or as they now call themselves, Prince Harry and Meghan. What's all that about? That's what it says on the website.
I'm also really interested, how did they buy Sussex.com? That's...
Yeah, I mean, I've got a house in Sussex, right? I don't grant them the use of the name Sussex.
But also, it's a county that's been around for what? How many gazillions years?
Yeah. And do you know what it also is? It's also now a catch-all, I think, trademark now for English sparkling wine made in Sussex. It's actually called Sussex.
She's also using her royal crest, which she was given on their marriage.
Right.
And there's been eyebrows raised in the palace about that. There's lots of bits of this website. If you go to it, it's all sort of... They still have sussexroyal.com as part of it. They have Archewell as part of it. They have archetypes. They have all these different parts of their sort of brand. But they're on manoeuvres. Something is happening.
Well, it redirects, doesn't it? From the old site. I was checking it out, actually. I looked at wales.com, which obviously still looks for Wales. I looked at gloucester.com, which is about Gloucester, Massachusetts. I looked at york.com, which is the leading heating and cooling industry website, you see. So all of these things... Well, you're talking about money. I mean, a lot of these sites, so car.com, for example, was the most expensive website which changed places. The domain name was 872,000 million.
Well, I'm amazed nobody had Sussex.com.
Well, then they put this
I think the royal family acquired it some decades ago.
A number of years ago,
They set it up the domain name was established in 1995. You wonder whether they had it or they just swooped in and taken it for their...
because he was not the Duke of Sussex, presumably, when they bought the domain name. No. Maybe they should just send him a bill.
It's very clear that they are still using their royal branding to sell themselves. It's very, very clear that they still push themselves as that. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be using, if they really wanted to leave.
And it's all a bit sort of cloying, isn't it, as well? It's all about humanitarian works and, well, there it is there.
Yep, she's
but I'm puzzled by the...
feminist and a great... And he's a great humanitarian. A military veteran.
Celebrating the
Invictus
Games, which are brilliant. I always stand up for Harry and Meghan. They've got a little element of that. Invictus Games.
Why can they not just call themselves Harry and Meghan, though? They don't want to be royal. They don't want to be part of the family.
Well, they said they didn't, but they do, and they wanted titles for their children.
Right. But why call himself Prince Harry on, what is effectively...
Because the Americans love it, and it's making them a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a brand. It's a very good brand, and brands are very valuable.
I'm told there's no mention of Netflix in this new website either, which is
another deal. You do wonder if this is a headache that King Charles doesn't actually want at the moment.
Well, the trouble is they can't stay out of the limelight, can they? I mean, every time you hear them going, I don't want my privacy invaded, they do something else which puts them back in the limelight.
It's really odd timing as well, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah.
You think about the week or the couple of weeks that the royal family, the senior royals, have had in this country, then Harry coming over, all those questions about that visit. Apparently he wouldn't... Yeah. It's been reported tonight that Prince Harry wouldn't be in the room with Camilla.
Yes, but I suspected that was the case because some people were saying, he had this meeting with his father and Camilla. And I was like, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have been there. And she probably chose not to be rather than it was his choice. Because
You
I
only
don't
go back to
think
the
she
book.
wants to see the little scrote, does she?
You only go back to the book of how scathing he was.
Yeah, he was horrible about her.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can understand it. You know, his mother was left by his father for another woman. And, you know, some people don't get over that. Some people have grown up enough to get over it. He's obviously not grown up at all, is he?
Yeah, but there's being angry at your father's new partner or old partner, new partner. But there's then making horrific, or really horrible.
But also, he's angry with
against
everyone.
people.
I mean, he's angry with, you know, his
The whole
family.
world.
He's angry with the media. He's angry with, you know, anyone who says anything about him. He's just angry.
It's his career to be really, really deeply unhappy and bitter and just kind of,
I think he's 40 this year, isn't he?
Well, he's not young, that's for sure.
I think he's coming on 40 this year or next year.
Isn't that an age when you sort of get over all that stuff? Or at least...
He's been over-therapied, in my view. I mean, he's just been sitting in too many Californian echo chambers, you know, telling everybody how terrible his life is. And the Americans are not buying it anymore. They're just not interested. They're like, mate, your life is not that bad. You're a prince. You've got a £30 million trust fund. You're married to a beautiful woman. You've got 2 nice kids. You live in a big mansion in Montecito, which looks like something out of a movie. And what's to be unhappy about? All he can think of doing is suing loads of people.
Well, and he's winning some of those cases. I mean,
yeah, but he's not winning the majority of them.
Yeah,
he's winning some bits of them, you know. But in the end, when is he going to stop?
I think the interesting thing, Mike, and we always discuss Harry and Meghan, that sort of stuff. The interesting thing is always some terrible stuff and some good stuff, and people forget some of the good stuff. I think look at things like the Invictus Games. I think is brilliant, and he should absolutely be applauded for that. I think understanding as a son trying to see his father for in the schedule. I think they talked about 30 minutes is what he got with him. He probably wants to see him alone. I get that bit, and you work on that sort of basis. And Charles had to change his schedule just to fit it in. And I think Charles, to his credit, was still working tremendously hard and had to juggle it around on that sort of premise. So
yeah, I mean, I think
that's good as well as the bad.
As a father, yeah, you would do that, of course. But you know, his relationship with his brothers, knackered, you know, that's not coming
telling
back.
thing that they didn't even meet when he was last over.
No.
Not even gave him the time of day.
Right.
And
It's incredible.
The cousins have never, I don't think they rarely met, or they may have met once
Well, I
or
mean,
twice.
I don't think...
and I don't think that was the warmest meeting between Harry and Charles. I mean, look, he saw him for whether it was 30 minutes or 40 minutes.
Or
I don't think Charles particularly wanted him leaping on a plane and rushing over.
Well, in fact, quite the reverse. We were told that, you know, they would have said, look, don't worry about it, you know, it's fine.
About it, but I wanted to tell you in person, and then they didn't meet again. So I don't actually think that was, you know, I think that was probably Harry being a bit dramatic, wanting to make a show of leaping on a plane and rushing over. Then he went back.
Went straight to Las Vegas, didn't he?
To host an awards, the NFL honours thing.
I know.
So, you know,
it's all about currency, isn't it? They just have to make themselves relevant.
This is what I mean.
And also he kept up that link with the royals. They've refreshed that link, haven't they?
Because it's like ka-ching time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Charles the King was spotted out and about today. He came back to London, I think, for some, what we believe to be some treatment.
Yeah.
And he looks okay. I mean, it's difficult to understand how that must be for him, because we know him to be a very busy individual. He likes to work. He must hate it.
And also,
anybody who likes to work, who can't work, he must be like...
But also things like chemo affect people very differently. I remember my father having chemo for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
And there were times after a course of treatment when he felt fine.
Yeah.
And then there were times when you'd feel absolutely knackered and very sick. So I think, you know, it's too early to say, but it's interesting they've talked about pioneering treatment, which people are saying may suggest immunotherapy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's obviously getting the very, very best.
Of course, he will be.
Absolute best treatment.
And he's the sort of guy who might like a bit of experimental, you know,
definitely.
kind of slightly holistic
bit of
medicine.
plants mixed in, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely
Oh, I
right.
bet he's got his holistic doctors on there.
Absolutely. But to his credit, he's talking about it as a result of him talking about when he had the prostate examination. The calls went through the roof, didn't they? Lots of people turned around.
But people have now been critical, as of course they would be, because he hasn't said what this is. And
Give the guy some privacy.
I'm not one of those. I don't think he needs to say
They've gone as far as they can, I think.
Yeah, I think
it's very difficult.
Same with Kate. I think it's absolutely her right to keep a gynecological
totally.
or an abdominal or a something issue private.
Yeah.
And the person forming
I have no
Sarah
problem with that.
Ferguson, I mean, to her credit, she's been out and about talking about that sort of side as well. So I think more people in the public eye who speak about these things, the better.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Now, there's one particular story I want to talk to you about, and it's something I read today about the birth rate in this country, which is now so low that it has not been as low as this since 2002.
Yes.
And in 2022, which is the last figures that came out, around about 600,000 babies were born in England and Wales, right? And it just struck me, and this is just a point of conversation, that's half the amount of people who came here last year legally migrating to this country, either to work or to supposedly be a student. 1.2 million in, 600,000 born.
Right.
The population is going up by a factor of 200% with foreigners.
Yeah.
I can totally believe this. When I was applying for my children for schools, when my eldest, back in 2014, we got the very last place in the catchment area, as it were.
Yeah.
2 years later, there's no problem with the catchment areas because there aren't the same number of births happening.
Right.
Also interesting.
You know what? I'm applying for primary schools and we're finding exactly the same thing. Schools are closing, and when we're in central London,
I know that's the case in London.
Closing because they simply can't get the numbers.
Right.
A lot of people have moved out because of the pandemic. They've moved out of London, but people are not being born, like little ones.
Yes.
And so we're just diluting.
And there are several problems with this, it seems to me, because if you don't continue to have, a healthy birth rate, then you don't have people growing up and going to work and paying for the people who are the older people.
I think a lot of it comes down to, as well, you have people who work in the public sector cannot afford to live in central London or around London, so they're moving further and further out. And it just becomes more and more difficult to find jobs.
This year is the year of the dragon, where population traditionally, especially in China, it increases dramatically.
Yeah.
We're very lucky to have a dragon baby. So it happens every 12 years. So on that sort of basis, there will be a population spike.
But similarly to this particular statistic coming out today, it was also, there was a study done, and about a third of current teenage girls don't want to have children.
Right.
Yeah,
and with a variety of reasons, either climate change, they don't want to bring children into the world.
I wish they would stop saying that.
But they're also saying, they're worried about the future, there's no security.
But it's expensive to have children as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Tell me about it.
But there are other
it doesn't get any cheaper either when they grow up, trust me.
I think there are other reasons as well. I think the cost of housing means that if you're in your 20s and 30s, and you're living at home, you can't, get married to your boyfriend and have a baby. You just can't do the normal things that people did in their 20s and 30s. So people are just... But also, I think women feel more confident to say, like me, one and done, like one is enough, whereas people used to just...
Yeah, I mean, both my parents came from families of like 7 or 8 children.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had all these uncles and aunts, but that doesn't really happen anymore. Let's talk about a magic roundabout, or perhaps not so magic. Apparently, £20 billion have been spent on this roundabout. I mean, people say we haven't got enough money in this country, but they spend money on some of the most ridiculous things. This roundabout apparently has got so many different road markings that it doesn't make any sense. I don't know whether you've been anywhere near this roundabout, but I mean, they do some very odd things.
They do, right? I live just off Old Street roundabout.
Oh yeah,
right. They've
made a right mess of that.
Oh right, they really have. And now it's not a roundabout anymore.
Right.
It's a half bout.
Yeah.
So what
it goes in 2 directions. They did the same thing.
Right. It goes in 2 directions, but also it's not a roundabout. So it's been cut off by the underground on one side. So you go round it, and then there are things coming at you.
Right.
Oh, I nearly fell over. There are things coming at you from the other way,
well,
and then they cross.
Don't get me onto my hobby horse.
This has taken them about 15 years to do.
They've done the same at Elephant Castle.
Yeah.
Which used to be just a roundabout and is now this sort of mishmash of nonsense.
Yes.
When you're driving at night now...
It's so terrifying.
Driving in it, you have no idea what you're doing, no idea where you're going. There's lights for cyclists.
That's even less reassuring.
There's people crossing that way, there's cyclists coming the opposite way up the road. You're going, what the hell am I doing?
I assumed the drivers knew what was happening. No, the drivers don't know either.
You don't?
That's even more scary.
Have you ever been to Hemel Hempstead? There's a place called the Magic Roundabout.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a big roundabout in the middle. Then there's about 9 or 10 minor roundabouts.
There's one of those in Swindon as well, which is actually not with any structure, but it's those mini roundabouts. But there's about 6 of them, and you kind of drive in, kind of shaped like a pretzel.
And you know what it is? You're dependent on traffic lights. Effectively, someone has programmed it all. You're really dependent on the traffic lights, just stopping people, just all driving into each other.
But that's the worrying quote. They're turning around and saying they don't understand it. So the people interviewed about this particular roundabout say it makes no sense. I would be interested to see what the stats are on accidents. As a cyclist, I mean, it's horrendous.
It's so scary.
There's a
very dangerous.
There's a story in the papers today about a young couple who died because they couldn't read the road signs. They do wonder whether these sort of roundabouts...
I got a ticket for being in a bus lane, over Christmas, because I was behind this bus, and unbeknownst to me, they'd redesigned this road.
Yes.
And apparently I was supposed to go to the right, around a huge big plant pot, which looked like it was the opposite side of the road. And I thought, well, I'm just stay behind the bus. And I couldn't see any signs that said it was a bus lane, so I just carried on behind the bus. and I got a ticket for something like 65 quid.
Good. And it's crazy because they're now expanding things like cycle lanes and stuff like that. So the Marylebone Road, which is not too far from Regent's Park where I am, same sort of thing. But everything just basically came to a halt as a result of it because the cycle lanes were so enormous.
I know.
And
Unbelievable.
it's terrible on that sort of basis.
It is. Absolutely ridiculous. But we've got more to do. We're about to do it. This is the bulldozing independent Republic of Mike Graham. Coming up next, the armed forces continuing to pile money into woke diversity policies. And we'll be delving into tomorrow's news as well. This is Talk TV. Now, it's time to have a look at what's going on in tomorrow's papers. Ryan, good story here about a cop killer finally in the dock, 18 years on. You know a bit about this.
I remember covering this story a long time ago, back in 2005, dispatched up to Bradford to cover this. But this is the case of a man who the prosecutors would say has evaded justice for the last 18 years. Now, he's facing murder charges for the murder of PC Sharon Beshanevsky, and he's in court at the moment. As again, happened a long time ago.
He was extradited from Pakistan in April last year.
That's right. This has been a big, long, sort of drawn-out case to try and get him back to this country.
Right.
And now he's now in court, and I don't know how long this trial will go on for, but he denies murder and firearms offences, and this case will probably go on for several weeks indeed.
Absolutely.
And it's important to say, I mean, it's obviously innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
And whilst they call him cop killer, in inverted commas, he will stand.
Well, he's accused of being a cop killer.
Exactly.
We
I think
say
that's the way to do that, yeah.
Absolutely right. Now, one for the Valentine's Day crowd.
Glorious story.
Brilliant story, this. Love sickness. It's almost 1 in 4 Brits have been clinically lovesick, suffering physical illness due to a broken heart. Now, there are some people who don't believe that there is such a thing as a broken heart, but I'm not so sure. I think people... I mean, I've known people who have become sort of lovesick when they've broken up with people.
Absolutely. The mental health and the strain on your physical health are interrelated. And we're talking about heart palpitations and so on and so forth as a result of it. And it's incredibly stressful. So you look at that sort of stuff. So I'm not surprised by these statistics. And I think on the eve of Valentine's Day, it's important to call it out. There are people who'll be sitting there all alone with their meal for one. And quite sad at all these sort of moments.
I
don't know. I mean,
get it with elderly people, don't you? If
yes.
say elderly people in their probably 70s,
if the husband
80s,
dies
90s,
and the wife dies.
Yeah, almost. I'm not saying the same day, but certainly within a few weeks or so. Often.
Although you'd probably be more lonely if you hadn't had broken up with somebody than if you had, wouldn't you? I mean,
I think, yes.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the meal for one and being on your own on Valentine's Day, but I definitely
I would never, ever go out on Valentine's Day. I mean, it's such a waste of time.
Most people avoid it like the plague, and, you know, most people think that tomorrow is just a commercial kind of load of nonsense, apart from, I think, the man next to me who's been buying his wife a Valentine's Day card at a petrol station.
It was a petrol station, wasn't it?
I've got him in a load of trouble now.
It's at the Westminster Tube. They sell cards there.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I mean,
you're a busy guy.
Tesco.
You're a busy guy. There is a card shop just over the road there, by the way.
All good. Well, what I love as well is what we talked about AI a bit earlier, that actually the rise in companionship as a result of artificial intelligence is the biggest thing. Elon Musk spoke about it last year when he was over here for the safety summit, the AI safety summit, saying that's going to be one of the biggest areas for people who are lonely. Having these AI companions.
That's only sort of one step up from a sex doll.
You call it companionship.
They are companionship because they will know you better.
You can't fall in love. You can't fall in love with an AI.
People do fall in love.
They have AI girlfriends. This is the saddest
stuff.
thing that Gen Z, it's reported, are looking for friends online.
Yeah, right.
Because they do not know how to look up from the screen. They do not know how to make eye contact. Or initiate friendships or relationships
and then
with
they become impossible to actually have a relationship with
because
they don't understand real life
or intimacy or any kind of anything about physical or kind of space or contact or anything like that.
There's a wonderful TV series which
we've
is being launched
created
in
a very
Japan.
sad world
In Japan called Love by AI, which is exactly that, which will give you things to say. They'll find your ideal partner and some sort of likes.
That's hopeless, isn't it?
Why do you think Japanese young men like rent girlfriends online? Because they just have no clue about how it actually works.
And they buy underwear in machines.
You walk into a bar, you smile at someone and you ask them if you can buy them a drink, and then you touch their bottom and all the things you're not meant to do. That's not.
And then the police arrive and you get dragged off to a pulp in the local police station. Let's do a bit of Operation Stop Vlad. This is a big NATO drill that's going on. It's going on. It started, I think, this week, and it's going to go on all the way through March. And it's in the wake of some of the stuff that Donald Trump's been saying. And in the wake of some countries now joining NATO. I mean, it's quite interesting. But I'm pretty sure I saw a picture of one of our aircraft carriers sailing off to the sort of Norwegian Sea, which is where they're starting to do all
diverse
this.
desert rats.
And apparently there's no actual planes on it at all.
No, it's like having a shopping bag, but you don't get the shopping.
No.
I mean, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because they had all that. That was the report. They couldn't afford to put the aircraft on top of this aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Is that meant to make Putin quake in his boots?
Yes.
That are empty aircraft
for his
carriers
next Tucker Carlson
symbolically
interview,
taken off.
I don't think anybody is going to make Vladimir Putin quake
I think that's a fair comment.
The Americans have upped their money today. Well, in fact, the Senate has actually approved $90-odd billion, but actually needs to get through the House of Representatives. So
they're saying,
good sign,
it is a good sign. We'll see what happens. And the Sun front page, which we don't have right in front of us, but I can show you, is all about Steve Wright and his rather unfortunate death that we announced earlier on in the show, Radio Wonder, which is a pretty decent headline.
Yeah.
He'll be sadly missed, I think, by
many
people that I know.
Yeah, I listened to it in the afternoons when he was on Radio 2 and Radio 1 before that, and that farewell music that I can hear in my head now.
Yeah, I mean, we played a little clip of his voice, and you just instantly
recognise it. And it's his voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I've seen lots of pictures of him this evening, I'm not so familiar with him as he was recently.
No.
But the voice instantly takes
you immediately know that exactly that it's him.
And his wonderful sense of humour. He also did a programme with my good friend Mike Reed. It used to be Reed Right.
We're out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. That's all from me. You have been watching, of course, The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. I'll be back at 8 p.m. tomorrow night, only on Talk TV. Don't miss it.